We're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there.
Are they going to?
You know that we're going to go into Fort Knox. Do you know about that?
The $245 billion gold rush. Why Germany and Italy want their treasure back from America. Deep beneath the streets of Manhattan, 24 meters underground, in the Federal Reserve's impenetrable steel vaults, lies a secret that could shake the entire global financial system. Germany and Italy have quietly stored $245 billion worth of gold bullion in American vaults for over 80 years, trusting the United States to safeguard their most precious national assets. But that trust is cracking, and the consequences could trigger the biggest financial earthquake since the collapse of Bretton Woods. What started as whispers in Berlin and Rome has exploded into a full-blown political crisis that has Washington scrambling to prevent a complete meltdown of the dollar's dominance. Leaked reports suggest both countries are seriously considering repatriating over 1,900 tons of gold using NATO cargo planes in an operation so massive it would require weekly midnight flights for 2 months straight. But here's what most people don't realize about this story. This isn't just about two countries wanting their gold back. This is about the unraveling of an 80-year-old financial architecture that has kept America at the center of the global economy. And the politicians driving this movement, they know exactly what they're doing. The whole arrangement dates back to the aftermath of World War II, when storing gold in New York seemed like the smartest move any European country could make. The Cold War was raging, nuclear threats loomed over European capitals, and the Federal Reserve's Manhattan vaults represented the safest place on Earth for precious metals. Germany's Bundesbank currently holds the world's second-largest gold reserves at 3,352 tons, and one-third of that massive treasure trove sits locked away in American vaults, worth approximately $134 billion at current prices. It gets crazier. Italy holds the world's third-largest gold reserves at 2,451 tons, with around 700 tons stored alongside Germany's bullion in those same New York Fed vaults. Combined, we're talking about 1,930 tons of European gold sitting beneath American soil, worth more than the GDP of most countries. For decades, this arrangement worked perfectly. European nations got security, America got leverage, and everyone trusted the system would hold forever. But that was before Donald Trump started attacking the Federal Reserve and threatening trade wars with America's closest allies. Now German and Italian politicians are asking uncomfortable questions. Is their gold really safe in American hands? And the answers aren't reassuring anyone. The political earthquake started with Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany party, the AfD, which has been demanding gold repatriation since 2013. Alice Weidel, the party's controversial leader, has turned this issue into a cornerstone of German sovereignty, arguing that keeping national wealth in foreign vaults is a betrayal of independence. The AfD's platform explicitly demands that all gold reserves be stored within German borders, and they've been hammering that message for over a decade. But listen to this. What was once considered a fringe position has suddenly gone mainstream. Conservative politicians like Marcus Ferber from the center-right CDU are now echoing the same concerns, linking Trump's unpredictable behavior toward the Federal Reserve to genuine risks for foreign reserves. When mainstream voices start sounding like the far right on issues of national security, you know the ground is shifting fast. The reason this is happening becomes clear when you look at what Trump has actually done to Germany. He's threatened 20% tariffs on EU goods, attacked German automotive exports, and made it crystal clear that he sees trade relationships as zero-sum games, where America must win at everyone else's expense. Germany, desperate to regain economic credibility from the AfD, sees gold repatriation as the perfect trump card in negotiations with Washington. The Bundesbank already proved they could pull off a massive operation like this. Between 2013 and 2017, they successfully transferred 674 tons of gold from Paris and New York to Frankfurt, each shipment 20 to 50 tons, executed at night using IL-76 and C-17 cargo planes with full NATO knowledge. The logistics exist, the security measures are tested, and the political will is building rapidly. Italy's situation adds another explosive element. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who promised gold repatriation back in 2019, is now in power and under intense pressure from Trump's trade war threats. That campaign promise has now transformed into potential policy. Meloni is caught between escalating trade tensions with the U.S. and domestic pressure to follow through on her sovereignty rhetoric, and it gets worse. The technical details of a potential gold withdrawal have already triggered warnings from global liquidity monitoring institutions about potential treasury market fragility. If Germany and Italy proceed, they're looking at weekly shipments of 50 to 60 tons in midnight cargo operations. That would shrink the Fed's foreign central bank gold deposits by approximately $29 billion in just 1 month. But that's not the scary part. The real nightmare scenario is what happens to U.S. borrowing costs when two of America's most reliable allies essentially declare, "We no longer trust your financial institutions." Market analysts are projecting that Treasury yields could jump by 10 to 15 basis points initially, creating a chain reaction that pushes up mortgage rates and corporate borrowing costs across the entire American economy. And the domino effect doesn't stop there. Germany and Italy's decision to withdraw gold would likely be accompanied by reductions in their short-term Treasury bill portfolios worth approximately $18 billion. When that hits the market, it could push the benchmark 10-year bond yield up by another 5 to 6 basis points, permanently increasing the cost of borrowing for the U.S. government at a time when interest payments already consume $659 billion annually. Here's the part that should terrify Washington policymakers. If this gold repatriation movement spreads to other medium-sized reserve holders, like the Netherlands, Austria, or Belgium, the cumulative impact could push America's neutral interest rate from the current 2.5% to around 3.5%. That would narrow the Federal Reserve's scope for fighting inflation and fundamentally alter the economic landscape that has favored American consumers and businesses for decades. The housing market would feel the impact immediately, with 30-year mortgage rates already hovering around 6.6%. An additional 20 to 25 basis point increase would raise monthly payments on an average $350,000 loan by $30, pushing annual costs up by $380. That might not sound like much, but housing economists predict it could trigger a 5% to... And the domino effect doesn't stop there. Germany and Italy's decision to withdraw gold would likely be accompanied by reductions in their short-term Treasury bill portfolios worth approximately $18 billion. When that hits the market, it could push the benchmark 10-year bond yield up by another 5 to 6 basis points, permanently increasing the cost of borrowing for the U.S. government at a time when interest payments already consume $659 billion annually. Here's the part that should terrify Washington policymakers. If this gold... The reason this matters goes far beyond economics. It's about the psychological foundation of American financial dominance. For 8 decades, foreign countries have trusted the U.S. to safeguard their most precious assets. That trust has allowed America to run massive trade deficits, finance government spending at artificially low rates, and maintain the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. But what happens when that trust evaporates? The answer is already becoming visible. Gold's share in global central bank reserves has risen from 11% in 2000 to over 20% by the end of 2024. If Germany and Italy's move pushes that to 25% by 2028, the dollar could lose 4 to 5 percentage points in global reserve share, translating to around $800 billion in reduced Treasury demand. Trump's response to this crisis says everything about his approach to international relations. Instead of reassuring allies, he's doubling down on threats and ultimatums. His attacks on the Federal Reserve, combined with unpredictable trade policies, have created the very uncertainty that makes foreign governments nervous about keeping their assets in American hands. The irony is devastating. Trump's America First policies, designed to strengthen American power, have triggered the first serious challenge to U.S. financial hegemony since the end of World War II. Giorgia Meloni's position illustrates the impossible choices European leaders now face. She needs to maintain ties with the Trump administration, but also faces domestic pressure to assert Italian sovereignty. Gold repatriation gives her leverage in trade talks, but following through could trigger exactly the kind of financial chaos that hurts everyone. The AfD's Alice Weidel has seized this moment to push a broader agenda of German nationalism and European sovereignty. By framing gold repatriation as national security, she's forcing mainstream politicians to choose: be seen as weak on sovereignty or risk a confrontation with America. It's a political trap, and it's working. Beneath the surface, the real danger is this: the post-Bretton Woods monetary system relied on nations accepting that their most valuable assets were safest in American vaults. That acceptance created a web of interdependence that made America indispensable. Now, that assumption is collapsing. The leaked reports about NATO cargo planes and midnight operations aren't just logistics. They're symbols of a mental breakdown in the global reserve system. Every ounce of gold extracted from those Manhattan vaults represents a country choosing sovereignty over cooperation, security over efficiency, independence over interdependence. The Federal Reserve's options are limited and risky. They could open a covered bond window that accepts gold as collateral, but that risks undermining the dollar's monopoly as a reserve currency. Or they could expand swap lines with the ECB and others, but those only work as long as global faith in the dollar remains intact. Washington's nightmare is already unfolding in slow motion. The countries that once anchored American power are now questioning whether it still serves their interests. Those cargo planes, if they fly, will carry more than just gold bars. They'll carry the physical embodiment of a collapsing trust that once seemed unshakable. Because the value of paper money, as history reminds us, ultimately rests on faith. And that faith is cracking one gold bar at a time. If this story opened your eyes, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell, because what's coming next could change everything. This is KG Auto, and I'll see you in the next episode.